Yeah, cool. Well, let's go ahead and jump right in, man. And for those of you who don't know me already, that needs a little bit of a reintroduction. I'm the chief editor and founder of Whiz, and the whole concept behind Whiz specifically is to analyze the intersection of arts, culture, and tech. Because from my vantage point, it's fairly evident that there's a convergence going on, and all of these fields will become essentially one and the same, as far as I'm concerned. So, in the hopes of preparing the minds of our time, and our peers for a potential future that really will be honestly unstable from my vantage point, I decided to actively learn from the best and share my insights as I've documented it on my Substack. I published that on my writing, and I also host a podcast, which technically this one would be. It will be published later on Spotify and YouTube. And yeah, man, say hello, world. We have well over across all of our social platforms, no less than 10,000 people that have seen our stuff before. And that's not even including Facebook, which I don't know why, but Facebook seems to be the place where this stuff takes off the most. But without further ado, I see we have like two amazing folks on the stage right now, and I'm going to introduce you all. So let's start with Alone, and then we'll proceed with Vega next.
You should start with Vega and then come to me.
I don't mind getting to you first, because technically it's like the flow of the convo, if you see what I'm saying. So yeah, like just like give a basic summary of like who you are, what you do, what community you're repping, that type of stuff.
Who am I? What do I do? I'm an artist, singer, songwriter, producer, photographer, and I make music mainly. I do photography as well. Working on a bunch of stuff right now. I have yet to release anything in Web3 because I've just been, basically in the lab cooking. And I rep my clone because I connect with my clone's energy and his vibe. I got a little bit of demon in me, so I like my demon because he looks kind of edgy and a little bit badass, right? So that's basically it. And I'm a big fan of Vega and what Vega does, and everything that he's been doing since I got the clones, and he was one of the first people I feel that was actually taking advantage of all the 3D files and as far as I've seen, he was one of the pioneers for just using those files and doing really cool stuff with them.
Yeah, I could not agree more, and I can't wait to dissect that. So yeah, man, like the man of the hour is Vega. Like, what's up, man? Like, what's your name? Who do you go by? What do you be rapping? And what are you up to these days?
What's going on, man? And I appreciate that, Alone. Yeah, man, it's really just Vega. That's like my actual last name. It's what people have called me for the last 10 years. My first name kind of just disappeared after college, and it's just been Vega, since then. But yeah, man, I've been in the space a couple years. Before that, I was in crypto. I've been in crypto since, I guess I would say 2012, because I was using it to buy things on like Tor. But as a serious like crypto trader, investor, or whatever, since 2017. And then, I saw what was going on with VR, like AR, digital identity in other parts of the world, like Japan with Hatsune Miku and live performances in the music industry. And I saw what was going on with that. And then, there was a crossover between digital identity and NFT ownership because of the IP usage. So I kind of just jumped right into that, and it all kind of clicked immediately. Um, I'm pretty brand agnostic as far as who do I rep or whatever else. Like, of course, like Junior brand is originally comes from CloneX, so I have a lot of affiliation with CloneX, a lot of love for people in that community. But I also have, a version of Junior that's from Valhalla. There's original anime style versions of Junior. Really, the branding is just around a character that's a robot with green hair. So as many different brands or realms or things or iterations that I could touch and, work with using the brand, I'll try to do, because you don't want to pigeonhole yourself and limit yourself to one group of people. I think like the biggest thing, I'll stop talking after I say this and let you get into questions or whatever else. But one of the biggest things I've been running into is that Web3 and the way that we interact with projects amongst ourselves, we kind of like cannibalize profits. It's like, hey, I'm going to buy your project because when I drop a project, I want you to buy it as well. So we're just like trading profits back and forth. And so if you like stick with one group of people, eventually you're going to end up with like all the money being spent up, or people that have stopped supporting you because they're hurt that you can't buy their projects because, it's all the money is being drained from each other. So trying to just be brand agnostic and branch out to as many things so that I can keep money flowing in from different places and we aren't just cannibalizing all of each other's liquidity.
Yeah, I personally couldn't agree more, man. I think there's a little bit of tribalism that has been going on that extends well beyond Twitter, in my humble opinion. But what I think has mostly been interesting in this experiment, if you want to call it that, of what the Web3 community evolved into over the last several years or so, it's very apparent to me that the potential that Web3 has, the companies take it seriously. Most famously, Artifact is one of the most prominent examples I can think of. And I think it's pretty cool. And from my vantage point, it's my belief that the clones are next. And we're gonna get into that soon, obviously. But I did want to ask both of y'all, actually, since y'all are very acquainted with the clones, like what's up with that? If you were to describe that to a completely noob normie person, like what makes a clone cool?
I think there's so many things that it could be. It's probably different for everybody. Personally, it was the ability to get the 3D files to enact, movement as the character or animation as the character or whatever else. And I like that they look kind of anime-esque because that's one of my big interests is anime. But for some people, they like CloneX because of its ties to like streetwear culture and like sneakers because of like Nike and stuff like that. Some people, I don't know, they might like the game gamification or video game like aspect because there's a lot of ties in video games like NVIDIA graphics cards and things like that are being built. You got Animus, which is, allegedly going to be a sort of Pokemon style thing. There's a lot of reasons that people like the Clonix altogether. But for me, it's the capability of the 3D files.
Yeah, I feel similarly about the 3D files as well. And I wanted to know whether or not Alon wanted to chime in real quick too, since you currently carry a clone as well, and a pretty badass one at that.
Yeah, I think for me at first, what got me interested in clones was the collaboration with Murakami, because I like Murakami's art, and that's what got me into the ecosystem. And then I'm not a 3D person. I want to learn that. I just do not have enough bandwidth right now, but that's super appealing. So I think once getting into the ecosystem, I think there's so many different aspects. Like Vega said, there's definitely the 3D files where you see a ton of people doing really cool stuff with those files, and it's definitely I think it's definitely enticing for people who are 3D animators or people who are proficient in Blender and whatnot. So that's a huge aspect of what I think makes clones cool, but I just don't think a lot of people know about it just yet, right? I think that's something that probably with the advent of augmented like reality and everything that's to come, that people are going to become more and more, familiar with. But I think there are definitely so many things like Vega said. There's the streetwear angle where a lot of people like Nike and they like streetwear and they like digital fashion. So I feel like, objectively speaking, it's probably one of the most diverse projects out there in terms of like the appeal and in terms of what's going on in the NFT space. Not that I know everything that's going on with every project, but from my perspective, I think it actually has, good fundamentals in terms of application and what you can do with the files and with everything. So I think that's super appealing. I just don't think people know yet. And, that's something, like I said at the beginning, right off the bat, that Vega was capitalizing off of, was the usability. I don't know if that's a word, or the gamification of these 3D files, and showing what you can do with them in practical sense. So I tend to agree with him.
I think personally what drew me into what the clones stood for was the fact that it's a community that understands itself in the sense that they know what they're about and they don't, beat around the bush about it. And I feel like so many other people in the space could benefit from that type of mentality. It's very refreshing to see that. And that's why I personally liked in these spaces for so long, even since the entire project launched. I didn't get one myself because I think a lot of it came down to observing, like you said, the practical aspect of what these things can evolve to beyond the wow cool factor. But as far as I can tell, the future of the clones is very promising. And one of the things I wanted to ask Vega about specifically is this Wonder Dynamic stuff. He's been essentially shilling all over my timeline, which, by the way, I do enjoy the shilling of that specifically, because every time I see something new from that, I'm like, whoa, that's just giving me a lot of ideas. So tell people that don't know what Wonder Dynamics is, why it's cool, and how that relates to your clone and all these other things, Vega.
Oh yeah, man. Wonder Dynamics is a video AI solution. So it will take footage and scan that footage for what it declares to be an actor. So it'll search out for a humanoid figure in the video that you've input, and it will use AI to replace that actor with a 3D model of your choice, as long as it's rigged correctly. So it's very quick, it's very effective. I like to use it because the space, not only the space, but kind of just like the world and the state of consuming content right now. The attention span is gone. People just want stuff every day, all day, every day. And so, to bang out like a video that normally, like, to animate would take days or weeks, you can do it in 30 minutes. And you can do it by just like shooting a video on your iPhone and, being outside, and then just replacing your own self with a 3D file and not having to worry about like animating and lighting and matching up the stuff from the animation to the real world environment. So it's pretty, I took a meeting with them to kind of like give feedback and see what they would want from us. And it seems like they're headed in a very like commercial direction with it. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So brief pivot on the content comment. Why do you think content matters, first of all? And second of all, what are the ways you yourself have been leveraging content for the sake of your brand, for the sake of your affiliation with the community that is the clones?
The content is important because the content is what becomes the foundation for the brand itself. And then once you have a brand developed, then you can plug that into all kinds of things. And then you're talking about like different kind of, like deals, like brand deals, licensing, like endorsement stuff, influencer, like paid campaigns, stuff like that. And it's just all based on, the basis of the content that you've created. I have a roommate and he's like a TikToker. He has like an agency for that, and he has like a few 100,000 followers and stuff. And he basically tells me like, as soon as you get a popular video, you're niched. and that is your niche, and everything that you create, from that viral video point is what people want to see from you, and that becomes your brand. So I guess, be conscious of the stuff that you're putting out if you don't want that to become your brand, because that's what will happen.
One of my favorite quotes of all time goes something as follows: that who you are is the brand, and what you do is the marketing. And I do agree with the sentiment that when it comes to how you present yourself, it's very important. And from our collective vantage point, I would wager it's even more important because it's a faceless brand. We don't have the benefit of what I refer to as a parasocial relationship, where people automatically associate certain feelings with someone that they see on screen. It's all virtual characters. And more than ever, having your character shine through, be it the virtual one or the way you behave wise, I think it is important to leverage that in the best way you can, and put that foot forward and present yourself to the world in a way that not only is in service of the community that finds you, but also is providing a better context of what that community is and why it's valuable. And I think it's very interesting that VR right now it's always been a thing, as in for a minute, right? VR chat most famously has been one of the most popular platforms that I can think about. And it was very interesting for me to see that, wait a minute, a lot of what I see on VR chat, that's basically what you folks are doing here on Twitter, except it's static profile pictures. Some of the people that I've seen in the past have that extra, sheen where their PFP moves. These are some of the lucky people from the 2009 era that kept a GIF as their profile picture. And yeah, like I was hoping that Twitter would head in that route of actually animating your PFP, but they didn't go that route, and I'm sad about it. And that leads me into my follow-up question, which is, do you think, in terms of the future of the internet, as in, the social platforms that we use to the platforms that we consume content on, do you think a PFP holds an importance? And the reason why I ask that specifically is because when you look at places like TikTok, right, or YouTube, for example, a lot of the emphasis, I'd argue, is placed on the content. But you can also recognize that the PFP has a little bit of a value attached to it, and some people, for example, might remember you based on the PFP, and as soon as you change it, immediately your engagement tanks. I've seen that happen before. But from your vantage point on these other platforms that are not Twitter, how would you wager LPFP to be in terms of its importance?
I think it widely depends on the platform itself. There are a lot of different demographics on different platforms. Like if you were to put a PFP like this on Facebook, I don't think anybody would give a shit. Like Facebook, I feel like is more the older generation that is like straightforward. And if you like read the comments on any thread, it's fucking wild. It's all like old worldviews, old ideas, old heads. So I think it depends on the platform itself, but also, the value of a PFP, depending on, who's around to appreciate it, could be the same as like, owning a Rolex or whatever else. I mean, I've heard that argument before. It's like, yeah, PFPs going to be the new Flex. They're going to be the new Rolex. They're going to be the new, Lamborghini or whatever else, depending on the value of it in the metaverse in the world. And that's the direction it's going to go. So that's an argument to be had. I mean, it's very possible. But yeah, as far as like going other places with them, it really depends on what demographic is around to appreciate it. And then also, like, is that PFP tied into the brand? Like Junior is a brand. If you were to look at the PFP that I have, you'd be like, oh yeah, that's Junior, right? But people that haven't really developed brains and are still like trying to associate their own like physical self as their persona or brand or whatever else. Um, changing a PFP, I don't think is really going to make a difference to them.
You know, I'm a big graffiti fan, and maybe I'm the only one that gets this idea because I'm in LA currently. Every time I see a mural, the first thought that comes to my head is, I wish this would pop up and come to life in front of me right now. And I've seen some pieces by artists that are in the space and outside of it that actually have pulled this off. Not here in LA specifically, just so we're clear, but I've had the privilege to see pieces when you scan them with your phone. It jumps out at you and it takes a life on its own in AR. And I'm curious to know your stance on that in terms of both its value and like what does that do for the culture in your humble opinion?
You talking about like the art itself, or like
Yeah, like for lack of a better term, digitizing art that's already existing out in the wild and giving it new life through technology. Do you see value in that? If so, why and why not?
if it's an artwork that would be replaced or wouldn't like stand the test of time. I mean, if you're looking at a mural in LA, like on a wall, how many times is that going to be repainted over? I mean, it could be there today and gone in a month when a new artwork is commissioned, or the way that LA is like businesses don't even last. Everybody comes out here to follow dreams, and like they open a store on Melrose and that store is here for 3 months and then they can't pay the rent. So they move out and it's the next person and they redesign, so all the commissioned murals and the artwork that you might have loved and looked at and be like, man, I love every time I roll by that, every time I drive by that or walk by that, 3 months later it's gone. So if you're talking about like digitizing those types of works, yeah, it would help them stand the test of time, and it would give the people, that love them or love that artwork a chance to interact with it or own it or whatever else outside of, where it did exist. But if you're talking about like artworks that are made to be in galleries and museums for their entire lives and beyond lifetimes, like, anything Van Gogh or Da Vinci or whoever else has made that's in a museum, like, I don't think that digitizing that really gives it any value. I think if somebody did digitize those things, it would be, pretty meaningless, especially because it didn't come from like the original artist itself. And yeah, I don't know. It would just have to be something that normally wouldn't stand the test of time anyway.
So, you're therefore implying there's an element of consent involved here in terms of the wishes of the original artist, correct?
Yeah, that's important. But yeah, there's different ways to look at, artwork. Some stuff is purely designed to be digital in the first place. And that stuff, I think, has the intention behind it for it to be valuable as what it is. But if you're like recreating something, there's a few ways that could be perceived, and some of them, aren't the best.
Okay. So we're going to have like a quick section that I like to call Hello Future Me, where I'm talking to my future self 100 years from now. So hello future me, I'm hoping that by now you have those fancy newspapers from Harry Potter where you can see the pictures moving and all that stuff. And personally, that's where my head is at in terms of hoping to see art jump to life. Because to sort of pivot a little real quick about my childhood and how I was introduced to art and culture in general, I played with toys all the time. Like wrestling figures, T-Rexes, cars, Transformers, you name it. And I would make up scenarios in my head all the time, and I would execute on these scenarios and film it actually. And I feel so envious of kids these days who, for all intents and purposes, they get to bring these visions to life. And what once was play now is content that can be shown and and appreciated by people worldwide. I see a lot of value in that. So I'm hoping in the future that this becomes a mainstream thing where just about any kid with a tap of a button on their phone can scan a figure and animate it and pose it and do all these crazy things. And I'm curious to know from the play angle, from your standpoint, like what if you were given all the tools, all the funding, and you were just told, "Hey, go wreck shit." Like, what would be your first move and why?
Man, I've been trying to gather for it, but the first move, like I really want to make a well produced and like I have like an exact style, like artist style, like animation style. Like I want there to be an anime with Junior Junior as like the main character. And I think about that as like immediate like global brand, recognition if it gets to like a network or something like that. And that's exactly what I would focus on first, because then you're building out storyline. You're giving this character like a life that people can want to follow or relate to or whatever else. And I think that's one of the most important parts of the brand. But I want to talk about what you just said also, because I think that's funny as well. When I was a kid, I obviously play with just as many toys. I'm sure Legos a lot, Bionicles, different action figures. And one of the things that always like let me down, I guess, is that you would see the toy on the commercial, and it would be like a Batman, like in his car, jumping off of some kind of ramp, driving through like some like paper hole into like some kind of cityscape, and then you would get the toy for real, and it would just be the toy. You don't have the cityscape, you don't have the ramp, and you don't have the environment to put the toy in. And it's like, okay, well, now I have this. Great, I have my imagination, but when I saw this on the commercial, it looked fun to do it that way. And you never can do that. So if you're talking about like scanning the toy, putting it in the environment and playing with it in a way that you had envisioned, but isn't like realistic, that would be sick. I like that.
I'll
Um,
take it a step further and say, I do believe that as our capacity for the tech we use increases, it's not that far fetched to envision, mini robots essentially that can take all sorts of forms. Nanotechnology as a discipline, uh, honestly, have fascinated me for a while, for the simple reason that when you think of nanotechnology from a sheer potential perspective, I see a lot of the applications there in sheer play in terms of, hey, you can take a toy, make that, have a sword or make that hold a mini gun or have it have a jetpack or something like that. And you can even, in theory, with the right kind of nanobots, you could actually bring a toy that wasn't necessarily designed to be animated and brought to life. You can then essentially rig it using this nano skeleton, if you will, that will infiltrate the inside of the toy and make it move for you. There's a lot of potential there, in my humble opinion. And I think when it comes to how that applies to the Web3 space, and I'll preface this by saying that when I say Web3, I don't just mean crypto. I think for me, when it comes to discussing crypto, I like to keep it separate for a very simple reason. I think crypto has a more financial value to the people it's intended to serve, whereas Web3 has a more creative value, a value that uh, encourages people to experiment and build things and come up with ideas. So that would include AI, VR, AR, XR, and all of these, cool things, and gaming too, to a certain extent. I do believe that all of that, all encompassing uh, Web3 component for me, that's really this convergence that I'm speaking of in terms of how I see the overall future of the world headed, especially in the industry that deals with entertainment, that deal with gaming, and that deals with even advertising to a certain degree. And I'm sure you may have seen some of these billboards by now that seemingly jump at you like in pseudo 3D. So stuff like that, we're going to be seeing more and more, I would wager. And I'm curious to ask you about your stance when it comes to, you know, the tech itself. Like there's a very fairly well documented sentiment, especially in this day and age of we have too much tech. We need to lay off of that a little bit and go outside and touch grass. Like, where do you fall on that spectrum?
Um, I like technology, so I think there are people that have like addiction problems naturally with all kinds of things. Tech could be one of those things where like people get trapped in the wormhole and they just never go outside. I'm fortunate to not have any sort of addiction, habits except for with maybe like sugar. I love candy. Can't stop eating it. But yeah, I like it. I like the advancements and stuff like that. It could be an issue to some people that have like those natural predispositions to like abuse, things for sure. But nothing's gonna stop the kind of revolution that we're in right now. It just appears to be like a technological like renaissance, because all of these like creative ideas that were so far-fetched and that were like so abstract, now it's just like, okay, well, I can just have an AI do it. I can do this and I can do that, and all I have to do is put these two things together that are just people that I know. So it's going to happen. And I think, especially because the world is so, hyper capitalistic, and there's such a big push in this industry and in pretty much every other industry to like gamify everything. Everybody loves the word gamify, and they're trying to do it to music. They're trying to do it to clothing. They're trying to do it to literally everything that they possibly can. And I kind of foresaw this years ago when Pokemon Go came out. I thought, what Pokemon Go was doing was genius, and they could take it so many steps farther, and they just, they didn't. Maybe they did a little bit, but now that we have these AR, VR headsets that can go outside and leave the house and don't have to be plugged into anything for 2 hours, we're going to see people gamifying geography and making deals with businesses and tying them to like world map based games. Something like a Pokemon Go. If you could sign a deal with every Starbucks or every McDonald's or every whatever else, and say, hey, we're going to place a station geographically at your location for a specific in-game item that forces people to go there physically. If I'm already there at McDonald's, why am I not going to buy a medium fry or like a medium drink or something like that? So it's just going to drive sales for other people. And if you think about Web3, like that is the collaborative nature, the cross promotion, and that's going to like just be a layer of gamifying like geography. It's going to go that deep. You know what I mean? So I saw that with Pokemon Go, but now like that we have it as like an additional layer of like interface in our eyes where things can pop up and like Mario coins can spawn on the floor in front of us. I see that happening for sure.
Okay. I'm going to take a brief moment to shout the clone gangs essentially pulling up on me just now. I don't know what is going on. I have a group chat that have maybe 2 clones in there, and all of a sudden I see all of y'all in here. So really appreciate y'all, and shout out. Just so y'all know, this is an open space for y'all to come participate, because as I've stated when the space started, my goal here is to present that culture not only to the peers that I have in my real life, but also to the folks outside of the space in general that may or may not know about the space and its value and the beauty I see in it, and the sheer potential, truth be told, that I see in it. I believe the future of entertainment is, as we speak, is being built off of the back of Web3. There is no doubt in my mind in that. It's very much in the days of the Nintendo, where the Game Boy came out and everyone was, going ape shit about it, saying, "Oh my God, this little square toy, like what could it possibly do?" And wouldn't you know it, Mario came out of that, Zelda came out of that, Metroid came out of that. So from a historical standpoint, I do believe that gaming companies specifically have a choice to make, uh, in the sense that, hey, if you were to pick a community that's worth building with, that's worth investing in, uh, I would think that the clones are pretty up there. I can think of a few other ones, but in terms of the way I've seen the clones move and the way I've seen the communities behave, it's really up there for me. And I'm curious to ask you specifically in terms of gaming, like, what do you be playing, man? Like, what's your vibe? What console do you play, and what games have you been repping lately?
I got a couple things to say to this. And first, I just wanted to speak on like one of the funny memories that I have, because you brought up like when the Game Boys first came out. I remember when the Nintendo DS, which was like the flippable Game Boy, basically came out. I took it on vacation with me to visit my grandparents in Florida, and when I got to the airport, these people acted like they had never, seen this before, and I got like questioned, like I'm just a kid, and they're questioning me like, "What is this? What is this computer thing? Why do you need these extra batteries? Like, what does this plug into?" And I'm like, "Bro, like, I turned it on, and it was Pokemon," and they're like, "Oh, okay." Um, so yeah, I mean, just thinking about like the impact of technology and how it not being understood is kind of hilarious as we're going forward and being in the space where everybody knows what it is, but nobody else does. As far as like the clones and stuff being a good match for video games, like I agree. And again, I mean, there's a reason that I chose to buy a Clone X. There's a reason why that I continue to use it, despite any personal issues that I could have with certain ways things are done. Like I still am going to rep the brand because I believe in the potential of it, and that's why I still have it, and that's why I bought it. But the infrastructure is incredible for it, and having infrastructure is like one of the most important things, because if you don't have it, it doesn't matter how much money you have. You look at like what Meta tried to do with their VR and how laughable that was. Like, it doesn't matter how much money he threw at it, you didn't have the infrastructure for it already, and so it just flopped. It looks ridiculous, you know. But when the game that I play most right now is Overwatch. I used to be super into video games, like all day. It's what I wanted to do. Like as soon as I got out of school. Now it's just a very social thing for me. If my friends are not on, I don't really want to play. It's boring. I'll get frustrated when my teammates are garbage and I'm not winning because there's no communication being had. And so like one of my best friends, he plays a lot of Overwatch because it's kind of like you have to have like high awareness and high strategy, and it's like really team based. So that's what we play. I play that a lot. Otherwise, it used to be like first person shooters like Halo or like Call of Duty.
Dude, Halo was my shit back in the day. I didn't get to play it very much because I came in sort of at the tail end of it. I'd say right about the time where Black Ops became the talk of the town. That was sort of like my era of gaming. But opposite to you, I've gone fairly into single player games. Zelda would be one of them, like I mentioned earlier. I've played quite a lot of. There's this like niche game that a lot of you may not know called Beautiful Joe. If you don't know what this is, I highly recommend you look it up. There's plenty of let's plays of that game out there, and the art style in particular is what drew me in. And speaking of art style, I think another thing that makes the whole clones thing cool as a concept and other projects like it is that it lends itself really well to what I like to call cross-medium stylistic appeal, right? Where a clone will still look like a clone, regardless if it's made into a stencil, into a graffiti, into a 3D model, obviously, cell shaded or otherwise, or anime style if you want to go there. And in terms of art styles that you would deem peak art styles that you would want to have your characters be rocked into. Could you name a few, notable movies, film, or other properties that reminisce of that style that you would want to emulate?
Yeah, I really like the uh, kind of satirical um, action style of One Punch Man, and how everything is so like exaggerated, but like so like amazing to look at. I don't know if you've seen One Punch Man, but like it's so over the top. It's really dope. The color choices and like the color art, I would like to sort of emulate Space Dandy. Space Dandy being the younger brother of Cowboy Bebop, which is a classic. But it's more like a modernized, like younger, like fun, very colorful, very beautiful to look at, like in space, type of thing. And then as far as like actual character design, um, that's something I'm still considering and still searching for. I have seen artists in the space who draw stuff that I really like admire. Um, a friend in the clone community, his name's Miro. He put us onto one the other day, and I really like that art style. And I'm considering even speaking to that person about it, but I'm not yet like I haven't solidified that yet.
You know, in terms of style, I'm I'm a old head at heart, unashamedly so, and I'll tell you that old school VHS, worn down aesthetic that 80s and 90s anime used to have, that's like peak for me, man. And for my own enjoyment, I'll casually pull out a cassette and put it into the VCR and plug it into the CRT monitor and just go to town, man. Something about it is just, for me at least, not only nostalgic but just unbeatable. Like once you see it, you see what what you're looking at. And Akira was in the show, both classics. A little lesser known one will be Alita: Battle Angel. They recently did a live action adaptation of it. Highly recommend. But yeah, man, I do have something in mind for you specifically in terms of the idea of what you do in the space, like what got you there. I think I've discovered you fairly early on in my Web3 journey. And a lot of that had to deal with my willingness to explore these other places because for those of you that may or may not like the context, I'm not one of those people that reps a community per se. I'll happily be a fly on the wall and learn, but I've never really had this like spot that I would say, oh yeah, that's like my gang, you know what I'm saying? And I'm curious to know, like, what was that process like for you in the Web3 space to just organically find yourself amongst these people and become part of their tribe?
I mean, it started in Discord. Um, it was all day, every day. People in there just talking about whatever else. In the early days, it was really fun to speculate legitimately everything. Like what if it was this? What if this happens? It was definitely fun to be in those kinds of conversations. And while the money was good, everybody's happy, everybody's friendly, everybody's having a good time. Everybody's like, oh yeah, let's go hang out. Let's fucking degen out until 4 a.m. together because I have so much money right now. It doesn't matter what I do tomorrow. So in the early days, it was just all fun to be there. And there are a lot of people that uh, formed like real friendships or like relationships or whatever, and they're still around and they're still kicking. And there's a lot of people that I love, and I got their back for anything. I've had people in this room, come stay at my place on an air mattress because they wanted to, and they're welcome back anytime. So there are people that have formed real friendships that did have good intentions that wanted to be here to build things, and I appreciated that. But as the journey went on, I became more, like I said, I use the term like brand agnostic, because it's very easy to lose yourself and lose like your center of balance, trying to like defend something, constantly, or like feeling the need to like represent something. You'll lose yourself over what you're trying to represent. And I try to stay away from that stuff. I try to stay away from like being too much of a fan of anything, so that like my views can still be a little bit more objective, and not so like, blind loyalty. Because I learned early on that like having blind loyalty towards anything will hurt you pretty badly, especially like, having grandparents and stuff that like worked at GM for 40 years. They'll only buy a GM car. If you buy any other car, you're like a traitor to the family or something like that. And then after so many years, GM says, all right, well, you gave us a lot of hard work. You only bought our products. Sorry about it, but your pension's gone. We're taking that from you. Your benefits, those don't exist anymore. They dried up. So I try just not to be blindly loyal or like super fanboy about anything. And that's where I've gone with it. But like, there are so many people here still that I have like so much admiration for and I have so much love for, and like that are real friends and stuff like that. So we'll always be around in that capacity.
Dude, honestly, shout out not only to you, but to everyone else involved in this. That's what I like to see personally. It reminds me of, the music scene where if you're a punk, type of person, like the punks, rap you, and if you're more in the hip hop scene, like people rap you like that. And obviously the EDM scene, that's like its own beast. I'm not gonna get into that. And I took the liberty to tag some of you, if not all of you, into a tweet. But you're more than welcome to, comment your thoughts or come up and shoot the shit. Because, like I said, I'm doing this specifically as a way to portray what's really going on. Not the mainstream bullshit, not the CNN headlines type, beat. I'm talking like, the real voices of the space talking their shit and really telling the world about, the value that they see here. So by all means, like share, so I can then take that and present it to the world. But some of the last few questions I have for you, Vega, deals with, your sentiments in terms of how things are going currently. I've seen some of your tweets that err on the side of frustration. I'm curious as to why that is and what you hope to be done in terms of fixing things.
If I had a solution for it, then there will be no frustration. So still currently looking for the best methods, but the method that I'm currently employing is just staying in my own lane and focusing on staying consistent and building. Because if you do enough things, like one of them is bound to hit. But I think a lot of the frustration comes from just having done so much and like staying, consistent. But there's what I talked about earlier as like in communities, there's the cannibalization of attention or engagement or, liquidity, where, people are buying projects because they expect you to buy their project, or people are liking your tweets or, retweeting things or showing people your stuff because they expect you to do that as well. And so it's like this trade back and forth and like exchange of energy that will eventually just be like used up, or it will leave people feeling like you don't support them all the time. So they don't feel the need to support you. But I think like, some people just don't realize there's a difference in the way that people build, or in the way that people, interact with things. And it's very personal. Like people take it very personally in Web3. But like if you have a favorite music artist, like traditional favorite music artist, how many times have you spoken to that music artist? Or how many times do you expect that music artist to like your tweet? Like, bro, I can promise you none of my favorite music artists know I exist. You know what I mean? So it's frustrating to be trying to build in a direction and then also have to combat with like using all my energy to entertain everybody else in order to retain support. And if I don't do that, then the support flakes, and they like forget all the things that you've ever done or ever built, or like how consistent that you stayed, or any of that. And like when it comes to be like nominated for things, or when it comes to like be pitched to places, it's like the people who just like recently popped up and are active and engaging because they haven't already burnt through all of that energy of exchange, trying to like keep everybody happy and they're fresh. Everybody's like, yeah, this is the guy that you should put on, and he's only been here for like a month. So that's kind of where the frustration comes from, for me. And I just don't think that there's a really good way to go about it, because the expectations that people have in Web3 are so different. Like never before would you look at a company and be like, this company owes me. This company, I bought their product. They need to do this and they need to do that. It's like, yeah, I don't know how to combat, that type of, sentiment in this space. And I'm been talking to people about like what's a good solution for it, but nobody really has anything yet.
So I think from a founder's perspective, being one myself, I have three thoughts about this. Number one, when it comes to people online, the way I think about it, they're just, voices, loud minorities, I would even wager to say. And don't let that be a distraction to the main purpose at hand, because I think a lot of people forget that what the bad side of social media can look like is when you allow the people that were not necessarily invited into the conversation to not only impact said conversation, but impact you in the process and derail it in any way they'd like. I've seen that happen fair too often in the space, and really on Twitter in general. And I think part of that awareness for me comes from the fact that I did not join Web3, or rather, I did not join Twitter for Web3. I actually have been involved in Twitter for a long ass time. And I can tell you right now, there's a certain expectation that you're supposed to behave a certain way, or tweet in a certain way, or talk a certain way. I don't really abide by that. I'll be my full self. And if you don't vibe with that, you're okay to voice your opinion, but don't expect me to debate you about it and go back and forth. Unless it's like a serious disagreement, or one of the rare cases where someone does you wrong and it needs to be addressed, perhaps I'll consider. And even then, it is my policy, as far as I'm concerned, that I treat my online presence the same way I treat a home. I don't invite guests in there I don't wish to have, in my vicinity. And that's for a very simple reason. The accessibility that people think they're owed online, it's at an all-time high, and the audacity is through the roof. So as the classic quote by Mike Tyson says, everybody got a plan until they get punched in the face, right? I'm not saying go around and punch people, but I'm saying don't be surprised when some of these words that you say online come back to haunt you outside in real life. Because, this is not just the online stuff. There's a bunch of people that, very much can be impacted by your words and your actions online and offline. And the second thing is, when it comes to, communities and how they treat each other, that's something I personally sat on for quite a while myself too, because the whole idea of, dissing someone else's stuff because they're doing better than you, or they have something that you wish you came across sooner, stuff like that, I think that should be dead ASAP. And that's for a very simple reason. Way I see it, the real battle here is not us versus us. It's us against, the 1%, the Disneys of the world, the Googles, the Meta, the those all these big companies whose sole pejorative is to maximize profit off of our back, off of our labor, and off of our attention. And I'm glad that in some capacity, Web3 has encouraged people to think that way. And that's personally one of the key reasons why I stuck around for as long as I did. It's because to this day, I see a lot of builders like yourself, to be honest, uh, head down, just coming up with ideas, shooting the shit, experimenting, sharing that process with people, and inviting them into the possibility of what can be. And the third thing would be, you know, look at the former quote unquote founders, right? Like the Jeff Bezos, the Zuckerbergs, the Steve Jobs. These people, when you look at the history of how they ran things and what they share in common, a lot of them are very disagreeable people. And I don't mean in the sense that, they're dicks, and that they boss people around to a toxic degree, which, side note, there's a video on YouTube. For those of you who are curious about psychology and human behavior and all that, I highly recommend you watch, titled "Do You Have to Be a Dick to Be a Leader?" And it dives into this idea of when you think about successful, productions, like movies or shows or everything that demands someone to be in charge and step in and command the room. Do you have to be a dick? And personally, I do think to a degree that's required. And that's for a very simple reason. When I look at my time back in school, I can promise you every teacher that we collectively as a classroom took seriously, we took them seriously because they set the tone off of the bat, right? They came in, sat down, told us, hey, we're going to open up the book at such and such page and whatnot. And some of them can be more or less relaxed about it, but the common ground is they're the ones that are here to show you and guide you, not the other way around. And I've seen some classrooms get wildly out of control because of someone who's not willing to step in and be a dick and be confrontational. And if that serves as a inspiration for you all, to be honest, is tap into your inner dick. Because I promise you, at the end of the day, people wouldn't allow them to treat you, or rather, people wouldn't allow you to treat them the way they treat you. I can promise you that. It's like the very simple common law of exchange. Like do unto me as I do unto others. So that's my comment on that. And my second to last question for you, Vega, has to deal with your perspective on the latest announcement dealing with the Apple VR. It's broken the internet, to say the least, and I personally am hype about it. But I wanted to know what you think is cool about it. Like, is it shit? Is it not shit? Like, what would you change? And how does the whole ecosystem that you're already a part of fits into that?
I think they crushed it, man. Like, I'm not sure what I would change, especially when you're considering like the stats of it, having to file 5,000 patents for new technology and just the way that like it processes as a computer while it runs all these other tasks and stuff like that. That's just absurd. I think they crushed it. Like, I don't really think that there's anything wrong with it. I told you already about like what I think about the future of everybody trying to gamify everything, and that extending even to like geography based or world, location based, and partnering with different businesses in different places to drive people in certain areas or whatever else. But it even goes into making things like directions into aesthetic and visually pleasing, gamed out sort of things. Like if you're following a GPS and all that kind of stuff like pops up in front of you, you're walking down the sidewalk and your headset puts a line down the sidewalk and tells you where to go and turn. And then you get to the grocery store and it directs you into an aisle and then highlights everything that's on sale or highlights everything that's on your grocery list. And, like makes it pops up with stats comparable prices in other places and stuff like that. Like literally every aspect of our life can be enhanced or gamified or whatever else by AR. And if people are getting to the point where they can get past that it looks ridiculous or stupid to wear these outside of your house, and we're allowed to do it without it like violating any safety restrictions or laws or creating hazards, then that's what's going to happen. And whether that's soon because of Apple or in 5 years and 10 years, it's what's going to happen because somebody is going to build for that. So when you tie that into a mainstream brand like Apple, like mass adoption is there. So I mean that's what I think. That headset is great.
You know, headset news aside and how goofy it may look sometimes, I'm down for it under one condition. Please make the shit comfortable, because I've worn some of these things before and my God, the nausea that I experience wearing them, it's like I just can't. And I'm more open-minded to the idea of AR experiences as opposed to VR experiences. And that's for a very simple reason. I think the applications there are much broader and in schemes and scalability. And it, in my opinion, it encourages people to interact actually in the real world. I think we already have plenty of toys and gadgets to keep us at home. Why not come up with something a little different? You know, like where's my holodeck technology? You know, when I need it, where's my little hologram? You know, mini AI buddy that like talks on my shoulder, like those little demons and angels that are in the cartoons. You know, whispering in your ear and shit. I want that. And actually, I've gotten the opportunity fairly recently to link up with some founding figures at the conference at USC that were demoing a virtual AR mixed reality setup where an entire room is covered in LEDs, and those LEDs respond to your emotions. I thought that was pretty cool, and I encouraged this guy to focus heavy onto the music industry, because from my vantage point, when you think of photography as an art form, right? It's very well understood that that art form kept the scene alive for a long time. Every notable artist that you can think of, there's a notable photographer behind the scenes that brings that artist to life. And I think there's an unprecedented opportunity here for just about anybody to be involved in this kind of fun. I think this sort of exclusive look in the behind the scenes of an artist should not only just reserve for the photographers or the videographers. I think the average person should be able to snag a selfie with their favorite artist of the day if they feel like it, using AR or VR technologies and other such similar technologies. And not only that, the music scene right now is really evolving. I've seen a video that to this day blew my fucking mind. It's this guy who's having a concert where essentially on the background there's like a full-blown 3D character, and you can see that the character is responding to the flow of the music, and the sound effects is responding to the character as well. I thought that was pretty cool, and I'll pin it down there in the comments for later reference for those that are curious to see it. But things like that, I think it's going to be more and more popular for people to see. And if you were to translate that into the gaming context, that's even more of a hype train for me, because the Travis Scott performance that happened on Fortnite, a lot of people were cool about it. Not only that, they were having fun with it. And I think that's really the way entertainment and technology converges in the best way possible, in my humble opinion. But as far as like what I gotta ask you in terms of, to really close this off and like make it pop off and, make it be worth your while. When you think about, what you wish to achieve in the next 10 years, as a founder, creator, member of the community of the Clone X, and beyond, like what would you look back on and think to yourself, I fucking did that, like I'm glad I stuck it out and I got to accomplish that goal.
The biggest goal for me, and hopefully, would happen before 10 years. But the biggest goal for me is to develop the IP and the brand of Junior to be viewed as like just a large scale character, similar to like Spider-Man or similar to Super Mario or similar to Mickey Mouse. Those are like my favorite examples, right? Like they can be in anything. Like I want the ability to be in any type of media role or realm, or to be scalable in any direction relating to those things. Whether that's cartoon, graphic novel, comic book, merchandise, music, whatever else. If you take any of those characters, there has been an iteration of them to do whatever. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. The IP is so strong that it could literally do whatever it wants. Like Mickey Mouse on ice. Who really gives a fuck about Mickey Mouse being on ice, right? But it'll sell out an arena to be like an experience or spectacle to be on ice as like figure skaters. You know what I mean? It's just like, that's the power of the IP itself. And that's where I want to get to as a brand, like using Junior as a character, because then it's like limitless and it's like forever. It's like eternal. You could sell it, you could pass it down, you could do all these things. And you don't pigeonhole yourself. I don't have to just be a rapper. Like being a rapper will get you so far. You can look at every rapper that's ever existed. Unless they were the best ever, and even still the best ever, went into other realms like acting and advertising and owning liquor brands and doing all those things. If you're just a rapper, you're only going to get so far, and you're here today and you're gone tomorrow. You have to branch out into as many things as possible while relating to the core and central brand that you create, so that you can just keep snowballing in all directions. And that's where I hope to be at. 10 years is a that's a stretch maybe. I don't know how long those things take, because obviously I haven't done it yet, but that's the goal.
Well, I personally wish you all the best, and for one, I got your back in these endeavors. I remember I invited you out to an event that I was attending fairly recently, and part of the reason why I even took the time to do that was because I knew that some of the people that were there were potentially people that could potentially aid you in reaching these goals. I think I'm at a place right now in the so-called community where I have enough of a step back where I can more or less see where the dots connect. And sometimes I see some dots being very close in proximity that demands, a little push to get the ball rolling. And in your case, I definitely think there's a couple of people that I've met recently that are not even involved in, the space battle. They're just, for lack of a better term, regular people that are just hanging out, telling me about how excited they are about the very thing that you do here. And it baffles me that more people don't do that, to be honest. I think my biggest lesson I've ever learned to date has been, this is that online shit can only take you so far, like take what you've learned here and apply it outside and meet people and create things and build what I like to call third spaces, this idea of a space that's not your home and not your job, and encourage people to attend there on a regular basis. That's how, in my humble opinion at least, culture is built. But this was a very enlightening conversation for me personally, and I appreciate you for taking the time out of your day to participate. And shout out to y'all as well for coming through and listening along. And I hope that was informative or entertaining at least. I try to stay more on the informative side because it's what I'm good at. But I've been wanting to talk to Vega for quite a while about some things, and I'm hoping you'll be down again for that at some point later on. Assuming the news in the space evolves into something completely crazy, which likely it will. But yeah, man, do you have like a last closing thoughts or something you want to plug? That you're working on currently, and that goes for basically everyone else. By the way, you're welcome to do that. I like to reference these into the publishings I do after the fact.
Nothing to necessarily like plug or anything like that. Just appreciate you taking the time as well. I always have time to speak about things with people that are like-minded or such as yourself that's like very, very articulate and like well researched or well thought out. These are my favorite kind of spaces. Like I've done a lot of interviews in a lot of spaces, and I get tired of the same question happening over and over because then I have to get like the same response, and the people that show up that I've always been there are like, how many times are you going to say this? It's fucking, what's the pitch now? But there are a few people that like really come with like thorough questions and questions that I haven't been asked before, or that give me a chance to speak on like personal experiences or memories that I don't normally get to when the interview or whatever else isn't formatted for that. So yeah, man, if you want to do it again in the future, absolutely.
Say less. And personally, I would like to plug something I've been using a ton, and I'm going to, obviously pin it both to the top and to the comment section. There's this application I've been personally helping in designing called Locals, and I'm very surprised at how quickly it took off in the last several, I'd say, few months or so. And Locals, if you don't know what that is, that's think of it as a Tinder app, but with the feature that a website like Eventbrite or Meetup would have typically. I think it's really cool because it's a place where you can meet people that are like-minded. You can host an event, or you can join someone else's event and just, put it out there and say, yo, let's link up. I've seen quite a lot of Web3 people use this app. So if you're near a metropolitan area, chances are it is a good spot for you to check out. So I can't highly recommend it enough for you to check out. It should be free, assuming I'm wrong about that. And if I'm wrong, by all means, you're welcome to thrash me in the comments. But yeah, man, I appreciate all of y'all for popping in, pulling up. Shout out to all of you, and I hope to see y'all in the future. And everyone have a good day, y'all.